Welcome to Doola HQ, coming live from New York City with another weekly live. Now, we're going to start things off with a topic. This is actually a topic which has come up. I choose topics based on what's come up recently in prior weeks. And a question I've gotten from folks is around podcasting. So I'm going to start off today. We had some questions that came in, but I'm going to start off today with actually explaining how we started a podcast at Doola. And I'm going to explain how I would think, if I was in your shoes, if you should start a podcast for your business or your brand. Now, the short answer is you should. That's my short answer. But let me actually get in to starting with some insane stats about podcasting. And this statistic is going to help frame why I think podcasts are powerful, but also why it's actually pretty easy to do if you can stay consistent. So enough of the preface. Let me start off with some wild stats here. I'm going to read this out loud. Here are the stats. 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. That's 1.8 million people who quit before 3 episodes. Of the 200,000 people left, so there's 2 million people, 2 million total. Of the 200,000 people left, 90% will quit after 20 episodes. That's another 180,000 people gone. So now here's the take home. To be in the top 1% of podcasts in the world, you only need to publish 21 episodes of your podcast. Your competition is not the 2 million total podcasts, it's the 20,000 podcasters who didn't quit. Does that guarantee you an audience? No. Is it easy? No. That's why so many people quit. You'll have to outwork the competition and grind it out, but knowing the process gives you more control and realistic targets. And then I had a little takeaway here, and I'll come back to now the execution of a podcast, but it's whether you're starting a business or a podcast, what these stats really hammer home for me is that a lot of times people think intensity is what matters, and intensity makes a good story. I crammed all night for a test, or I sprinted and did this race, but intensity makes a good story. Consistency is what makes progress. Yeah, maybe one week you did 7 episodes back to back, or one week you worked out 7 days, but if you didn't do anything the next rest of the year, not only are you not going to make progress, but it's that person who just did one podcast every week, rain, snow, sleet, sun or shine, and the person who just worked out once a week for the full year. They are going to make that progress. So you can apply it to so many things in life. Intensity makes a good story. Consistency makes progress. It is so true for podcasting. Now that you've seen these stats, I'm going to now circle back to explaining why we actually started a podcast at Doola. And my answer to should you start a podcast is yes. That's my answer. It's actually an unequivocal yes. However, I'll give you some context. So what should it look like for your business, and how does it look like for Doola? So let me take you back in time. It was a little bit over a year ago when we decided to actually start a podcast, and we called it the 15-Minute Founder. Now, what you can see here, I just showed these stats. To get into the top 1% of podcasts, you just need to make it past episode 20, publish 21 episodes. So you can see we're at episode 19. We are 2 episodes away from being in the top 1%. Literally, just sticking to this. Now, let me go back in time. When we started the podcast, our thought was, let's actually come up with a concept which is going to be catchy. There are so many podcasts out there. So I'll give full credit here to Harry Stebbings, who has a podcast called the 20-Minute VC. I saw that and I liked how, hey, there's 3-hour Joe Rogan podcasts, and not everyone can be Joe Rogan. But I wanted something that's short, digestible, easy to create or record for us to actually create, and something that someone could actually listen to when they're brushing their teeth or commuting to work on 2x or 3x speed. Some people listen to podcasts that way. And the idea was, we work with a lot of founders. I personally like hearing the tactics, the strategies, and the tips behind what founders, entrepreneurs, creators do to have these outsized successes. So why don't we just combine these? Let's interview founders. Let's make it short and snappy. And let's add some alliteration. 15-Minute Founder. 15 minutes, shorter than 20 minutes. You can literally, while you're brushing your teeth or getting ready or going to work, listen. Has some alliteration. Alliteration is always good for marketing. And I'm able to actually talk to these folks, and it's founder to founder. So that was the start. Our first guest was Sahil Bloom, shout out Sahil, doola investor. And our next guest was Ankur Nagpal and then Amanda Getz. Now, the goal was, I remember when starting, my thought was, let's do a podcast every single week, right? Every single week, we'll do 52 a year, we'll crank these out. And the team made a really good point saying, hey, let's start with something we know we can maintain. In hindsight, that was an incredible decision because, again, intensity makes a good story. It would have been really cool if out the gates, I guess, 26 weeks in a row we hit a podcast. But if you can't maintain it, you don't have anything to show. So in this case, the goal was once a month. So we started once a month. And as we went through, once a month, the goal was let's find guests. Nate O'Brien, Billy McFarland, Zach Pogrub, Luisa Nicola, Brooke Hiddink, Andrew Young, Gennaro Farah, Maya, Avni, Robbie, Channing, Jason, AC, Alex, Aaron, and then Ramin. And we now actually have a much bigger backlog of guests. So we are 2 episodes away from making it into the top 1% of podcasts. And you might say, oh, how many subscribers or how many downloads do you get? I'll come back to those stats. To make it into the top 1% of so many things in life, all you need to do is just outlast people. So we have a top 1% podcast, and that's just from staying in the game. And we now have a bigger backlog where, as a team, we're now at a point where we can actually get to publishing multiple episodes per month. So now the pace is going to pick up, the quality's picked up. The team told me, hey, you have to stop asking the same repetitive questions on podcasts. So the quality is going up, the quantity is going up. And the other really cool flywheel which happens here is when we first started the podcast, why would anyone want to come on your podcast? They really want to come because they much like you or you're going to give them some reach. So our audience was smaller and we didn't have the social proof. However, now when we're pitching and reaching out to podcasts, we can say past guests include and list the guests we've had. We can just send them to this page. And people, we're all social animals, say, oh, whoa, Doula's invited and Doula's interviewed some really cool guests. So now you have social proof going for you. Now, every time we publish the episode, our audience of over 250,000 on social, we're amplifying your brand if you come on. So the person's saying, oh, yeah, this is cool. I'm going to get reach for my business or brand. And you've interviewed other people. Okay, this must be kind of legit. So it gets easier to actually get new guests on. The flywheel spins there. Your podcast now gets more reach because you've been putting out content. So the audience gets more reach. More people watch your podcast. So now more people want to come on your podcast too. So many flywheels start to spin. But the hard thing is here that doesn't happen for the first 6 months or 12 months. It could even take longer. It's why, unfortunately, so many people quit because they don't see those results. But behind any podcast success, and again, I'll say, are we a success? Yes, we've made it to almost 20 episodes. We have to get there first. But the key is staying in the game. Now, let me circle back to why I would actually recommend any business to have a podcast. First off, having a podcast allows you to, in a very, very intimate setting, and I will use the word intimate, talk to people who are either in your ideal customer profile or partner profile. So literally in an intimate setting, 15 minutes to 60 minutes, you're sitting down talking to the camera one-on-one with a potential customer or partner, or you're talking to someone who is going to help inspire or educate or entertain your eventual end customer. So that's the way I think about it, is you're able to have this conversation with someone who either might be your business's direct customer or partner, or it can help inspire, educate, and entertain your end customer. Now, why is that important? Obviously, if it's your potential customer or partner, effectively, it's a form of a sales conversation. But here's the beautiful thing. It's not a sales pitch at all. All you're doing is getting to know each other. And you're talking through this conversation. And that is such a better way to go about any type of relationship building in life versus sending an email, which is 15 paragraphs with, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this. One, people's inboxes are overloaded. But two, you get to cut through that noise and just talk to someone. So that's the first thing. It's really relationship building if it's your direct potential customer or partner. The second thing, though, is every single person on earth, we're social animals. We want to spread our message or have some sort of impact. I haven't really met anyone who doesn't want to have some type of impact. And it doesn't have to be impact in the type of, I want to build the next SpaceX or the next Facebook. They might want to have an impact in their community or their family or with their friends. They want to feel like they had some impact. Same thing goes for partners that want to come onto a podcast or people. They want to help share their message. So you are giving them a voice on your show. And you might say, okay, I don't have many followers or an audience. Everything has to start somewhere. So everything has to start somewhere. Then what's the reason why they would come on? Maybe you were going to say, hey, I'm going to take this podcast and I'll give you the raw footage and we'll clip it up. So they can then at least post it on their channels. So when I talk to guests, I always try to think about what's in it for them. And the easiest thing that's in it for someone else is the ability to amplify their name and brand. Now, the beautiful thing here is for the 15-minute founder, we have this beautiful flywheel where for the guest gets to amplify their brand, their message for free. We're doing that. So they have an automatic win. For Doola, we actually get to potentially talk to someone who could be a partner, a potential customer too, but their audience likely has founders who we're trying to support. So Doola wins because we're going to get some access to their audience by spreading their message. They'll amplify, they'll share, then potential founders or creators or e-commerce entrepreneurs will hear about Doola. So that's how Doola gets a win. We get to have a very intimate conversation with someone smart. And I'll actually add a fourth thing here. I was going to say there's 3 wins, but the fourth win, or let's go one by one. So win number 1 is that the partner or the guest coming on your podcast is going to get audience amplification for free. Always start with them. What's in it for the other person? Number 2 is Doola is now able to have a really cool guest come on who could be a customer for us or a partner, or their audience is aspiring founders. Number 3, aspiring founders win. Think about the listener because they're getting really cool insights, tips, and tricks. One of my favorite questions, I actually asked this to Aaron, is take me through the scale of 0 to 100K, 100K to 1 million, 1 to 10 million, 10 to beyond, and tell me about the mistakes you made. Founders want to know this knowledge from people who've done it. So we're providing that value, that education. And then the fourth, I just came up with this, is I get to learn. So if you're out there saying, hey, what's in it for me? I just get to ask questions that I find personally interesting as well. I ask most guests, hey, how do you drink your coffee? Just because I'm curious. I like to ask what your morning routine is, just because I'm curious. I like to ask if you could have a billboard and put any single message on it, what would it be in Times Square? I ask that because I'm curious. So you get this chance to have this conversation, just ask things that you're curious about. And chances are, if you're curious about it, someone else will be curious about it too. So with that, that is where the podcast gets to. And again, it's hard because you might not have the audience. You don't have the social proof of guests. It might just be you and Riverside or you and Restream trying to record, and you're thinking this is overwhelming. But everything starts somewhere. And again, all you have to do, just to have this number in your head, make it past 20 episodes. If you can make it past 20 episodes, because 90% of people, I got to share this one more time, 90% of people in podcasts quit after 20 episodes. That is wild. But it just goes to show in life, it is so hard to stay consistent. I actually like to think that the thing that people are most consistent with, probably the only thing, or one of the only things, is brushing their teeth. And even then, I know some people who maybe skip a night or two, but let's say brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth, sleeping, eating, drinking water. Those are probably, if you think about it, for most people, the only things that they do every single day. And even with a podcast, the ask isn't to do it daily. You could do once a month. You could even do once a quarter. The key is just staying consistent, because over time, that's where the compounding starts to happen. So now coming back to your business, let me actually give you a tactical playbook for if I was starting a new podcast again for a business. Here's exactly what I would do. The very first thing is pick a format that you can stay consistent with. So what we do with Doola is we actually have a podcast, which we put on YouTube. So we do video recordings and we only do in-person recordings. I've just found the quality is so much better when we're able to sit face-to-face in New York City and do the recording. So we do not do any remote recordings. Does that add a bar of friction? Absolutely. So you need to choose a format you can stick with. That might mean actually, hey, I'm only going to do remote because that way I can do it from my laptop. That's completely fine. That's okay. Pick a format you know you can stick with. For us, we have a studio, which we've reserved space in. It's near the office. Flexible bookings, not too far to go. So we know we can stay consistent with that. So pick a format you know you can stick with. Number 2, you have to pick a topic you're actually interested in. I was telling you with the 15-minute founder, I ask things I'm interested in. I'm learning. I'm leveling up. And it helps the business. There's just so many ways it actually helps the business, myself learn. So if it's not something you're interested in, you're not going to stick with it. Don't start a business about marketing if you don't like marketing. Don't start a business about startups if you don't like startups. It's completely okay. Don't start a podcast about fashion if you don't like fashion. You can choose whatever you'd like, but it has to be something you're genuinely interested in. Now, once you've chosen the format, come up with a title or a name. Again, in this case here, You can come up with something with fancier alliteration. To keep it simple, you could even call it the Your Name Show. But for your business, I would just go through this exercise of thinking, who is your ideal customer? Who is your ideal partner? And what does your customer want to know? In terms of then guests you would bring onto the podcast, think about it from what type of guest could potentially work with my business, again, as a partner or individual customer, or what type of guest has an audience that matches my target customer. And then again, the value for the guest coming on is they're going to get reach. You might not have the reach yet, but you're giving them a platform. And even if the platform is just an incremental 100 people, that's still something. So you'll build that over time, but at a minimum, let's say you have zero reach, zero social media profiles, you can at least say, hey, I'd love to interview you. I'm going to put you on my channels. I'm going to give you the raw footage. I'll even do some lightweight editing. Again, you're really selling yourself here. But then the person's like, okay, I might not get the distribution, but they're going to get me some really good footage and they're going to clip it up for me. And there's lots of AI clipping tools you can have shorts with. So if you are starting with zero audience, that's okay. You can oversell and say, hey, I'm going to help you with the content. You'll give you the clips. But even if you have a small audience, the incremental exposure for anyone is important. That 1,000 people audience could turn into 100,000 in a year. So that's what the other person's thinking is this can grow over time. Now, once you've done that, the key is you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your system. So the key now is to have very clear systems. Now, this can take time. I'll even admit in Doola, we are still ironing out and improving our systems for this podcast. And part of the reason why is because we're now going to try to increase the amount of podcasts that we're producing, more content going out, which means there's more moving pieces. And now there's more distribution we want to do. So having the processes is very important. In hindsight, one thing I wish we did from day zero is having a end-to-end Notion document or Google document, which just outlines the end-to-end process. And then you can iterate as you go, but actually just taking the time to write that down can help. And that'll help you avoid issues. We've actually had this happen, and better at 19 episodes than at 900, where we actually recorded, and then a lot of studios will send the footage in, but if you don't download the footage in 30 days, they delete it. So unfortunately, we had an awesome guest come on, but it fell through the cracks. We didn't download the footage on time. We saw it at 31 days. We just missed the email, and we lost the footage. And that was because, again, there was a gap in the process. So that's one example. That's a bummer, but it happens. And the best way to avoid that is, again, ounce of prevention, pound of cure. So to summarize, for your business, and I would say as early as possible, you can start something, pick a format you can stick with. If you don't want to go on camera, that's okay. You don't need to do video. You can just do audio. If you really like video and you don't want to deal with other, sharing it on Spotify, etc., just do YouTube. You can keep it pretty simple. If you don't want to do in person, you can do Riverside. Riverside's a tool where you can go online. You can even do Zoom webinars. Keep it simple. But I am really bullish on, and I have a ton of conviction on what you're doing, is you're able to build relationships with, again, people that can help your customers or help your business directly, and you're helping them amplify their business. And that's what everyone wants at the end of the day. So that is the Doola 15-minute founder. We have an incredible backlog. And I will say, if you know someone who you think can inspire, educate, or entertain founders, I like to use the word inspedutane. Inspire, educate, entertain. And I think the best podcasts do all three of those. That's why I like doing this podcast too. Let me know. Maybe you're listening and saying, hey, I want to come on. You can reach out to me. I'm always looking for interesting guests here. So that's the story of how we started the 15-minute founder. And we are so close to getting to the top 1%. Actually, we have the next episode in production now. So we're going to hit it. It's inevitable, but we're just getting started here. And it's been really exciting to see this. There's been some months when, hey, we've had to catch up and book guests, but the key is just having a system that you can stick with. If it can be an everyday system, you're going to survive. Because again, look at these stats. I have to keep showing them. To get in the top 1%, you just need to publish 21 episodes. Your competition is not the 2 million total podcasts. It's the 20,000 people who didn't quit. That's your competition. It's the people who are being consistent, not the people being intense, starting and then stopping. Okay, let me pull up the chat. We got a couple of comments that came in here. First comment was from a tool. Great to see you. I'm doing fantastic. It is a fantastic Tuesday here. I'm live in New York City. I'm hydrated. I'm feeling great. Got a little morning stair stepper in, so I have some post-exercise endorphins flowing. Consistency is the key for everything, I guess. I actually do think that's the key to anything in life. I would, someone was, I heard this somewhere, I forget where, but what's the most important trait or skill for someone building a business? I think consistency could be the word, but I would actually say it's discipline, which I think the two are tied together. But it's the with discipline you can stay consistent. If you are consistent, do you have discipline? Yeah, I guess you kind of do. So I don't know which one of those two words I would choose, but I think that's actually probably the most powerful word because in anything in life, your health, your wealth, your business, if you are consistent, and I think discipline can actually help with consistency, and then once you are consistent, you start to see the results, you actually need less discipline. It's actually a cool flywheel. I truly think that's the key to anything in life. Anything you want, any goal you set, you can actually get there. Maybe you're not to the amount. Like let's say you have a saving goal or a business goal. You can make progress towards it and way more progress than anyone just by staying consistent there. So a tool, I completely agree there. I do think consistency is the key for everything at the end of the day. So that is the story of how we started the 15-minute founder. For folks who have just tuned in, I'm going to give a very quick recap here. We started the podcast and we called it the 15-minute founder because it had nice alliteration. There was this podcast called the 20-minute VC. I thought you could listen to this when you're brushing your teeth. And I thought this is an awesome way to, one, for me to interview cool people, two, to give these cool people reach, three, these cool people might need to use doula or their audiences or companies might. And then four, we get to create valuable content for our founders, either using doula or prospective founders. So it serves as a way to draw these people in and educate people working at doula or using doula at the end of the day. So that's the thing. And if anyone is listening and is thinking about starting a podcast or has questions about podcasts specifically, drop them in below. And I'll give one more plug too. If anyone here knows a great guest for the 15-minute founder or themselves would like to come on, you can reach out directly to me as well. Okay, that's a crash course in podcasting. If you also disagree with me, let me know too. I'm all for healthy debate. Maybe you think podcasts are a bad idea. Maybe you think podcasts are dead. I disagree on that. Strong opinions loosely held, but you can let me know that. Last but not least, let me actually pull up some questions that came in from the previous week. We'll fly through a couple of these here too. Question here. This question comes up a lot, but I'll actually touch on this here. What state should I file my company in? So let me do a little trivia on our system here. I'm going to ask you the question. You don't change your answer. I'll ask you the question. Keep it in your head. What is the best state to form a company in? I'll give you 5 seconds. Okay, do not change the answer in your head. I'm betting, actually, I'm almost positive 90% of you listening said Delaware. And I know that because I've actually asked people this before, and we've had 90% plus of people say this. Most people think Delaware is the best state to form a company in. Wrong. Delaware is the most popular state to form a company in. There are more companies formed in Delaware than the people in Delaware. Delaware is sexy because, historically, that's where many businesses have been formed. There's the Delaware C Corp, which is typically formed there due to the court system in Delaware and the case law history there. However, the best state to form an LLC in is not Delaware. For a U.S. resident, it's the state you live in because you're doing business there. And if you form in Delaware, but you live in New York, you now have to do a foreign qualification to register to do business in 2 states, and you've now doubled your fees. So you just doubled your fees by thinking it was Delaware. If you're a non-U.S. resident, you can actually choose any state to form an LLC in. We actually see most non-U.S. residents form in Wyoming because it's slightly cheaper than Delaware in terms of fees. And don't sleep on Wyoming. Wyoming is the Swiss Alps of the Rockies. The first LLC, fun fact, I think this is a fun fact, was actually started in Wyoming in the 60s. And Wyoming's very forward-friendly when it comes to legislation. They've pushed the boundaries on crypto. The first DAO LLC was actually one of the first LLCs was in Wyoming. Very e-commerce friendly too. And you get all of the benefits, limited liability protection, the ability to have tax flexibility. LLCs can be taxed as C corporations or S corporations, and the ability to get an EIN, which allows you to get a business bank account. So there you go. You can surprise someone at trivia next time. You can ask them what's the best state to form an LLC in. They'll probably say Delaware. You can tell them, actually, it's the best state to form is the state you live in. And you can tell them, don't sleep on Wyoming. So I think that's a fun fact, but I also like LLCs a lot. Okay, so that's what state I should file in. And we'll do one more question here. If there's any live questions coming in too, I'm happy to take them. Oh, we got a couple here. Let's go. I always like the live chat. Cosmic Sage, hello. What's up, Cosmic Sage? And we have a question here from committee. Can we do something to stand out our job application to doula? And also, can we reach out to HR directly for the job application? Okay, I'll touch on this for doula, but I'll just zoom out of it for anyone looking for a job or applying. One, you can check out our careers page. I'll actually pull that up right here. So I'll show you anyone listening or watching, if they would like to navigate to this page. You head to our website. You can go into resources and then careers. And then here you can see exactly how we hire. You can see our values. You can see our non-values. And you can then see all open roles. So this is where you can go, and then you can apply directly through here. So you can see the roles that we're hiring for. We're constantly adding new roles as well too. You can check this out. You can apply directly through here. So that's what I recommend. Whoops. This is what pops up, and then you can apply directly through here. So you can see the open roles on the engineering side, finance, founders team, marketing, ops, product, sales, tax compliance. We're hiring across the board. Check this out here for any open roles. I'll also plug, you can actually pitch us on a role. So if you think you can add value and you don't see the specific role, pitch us. Define the role for yourself. I am all ears. I want the best brains in the business, whether they're investors, customers, or potential doulians. That's what we call people who work at doula. So please, you can pitch us on a role. Seriously, if you don't see a role that fits exactly what you think you can add or value, put it here. Apply. Would love to see it. Now, to zoom out a bit, in terms of standing out, I'd say the biggest thing is, one, apply and take some time to think through the questions. But the biggest thing, and I've learned this over the course of the last couple of years of doula, is that especially at startups, you really need people who can come in and have an impact from day zero. And that comes from, obviously, I call the intangibles, which are things like the work ethic or the drive or the internal discipline and the intrinsic motivation, all of those things. I call those the intangibles. But you also need to have the subject matter expertise or fit so that you can actually come in and hit the ground running. Now, that doesn't mean that you aren't or you are expected to know everything happening internally at the company. You're not going to. Most people at doula actually did not know much about LLC formation, bookkeeping, or taxes before joining. But their rate of learning and how fast they can learn is very high. So it's that slope which is more important. I don't care if you start down here in terms of how much knowledge you have about what doula does as a business in terms of EINs and LLCs. But what's very important is that you can get to adept and beyond quickly versus someone who maybe has that knowledge, but their slope of learning is lower. So I think that slope of learning is so, so important. And the bigger thing, though, is for any role, we think very intentionally about any role that's listed publicly, because we've thought internally, hey, here's the exact need at the company. We create an internal scorecard that defines what exactly are the competencies we're looking for, what are the outcomes we're looking for, and then the listing's done. So we're thinking very intentionally. I think oftentimes if there isn't a good fit at a company, it's often on the company because they didn't clearly think about, is there a need here, and who and what type of person do we need to fill that? So committee, in terms of standing out the job application, I would just say really think through, here's the exact job description. We take a lot of time to think through exactly every single word that goes onto that JD. Can you in your application best show or demonstrate or explain, I can do each of these things? So that's the advice I'd give there. Just really look at the JD and say, do I think I can do those? And then in the best way possible, try to answer that in the application. Okay, last question, I have to hit this before we drop off, is have you raised any money yet? How do you deal with shiny object syndrome and what people think of you? Let's go through all three of those. Doula has raised $13 million of venture capital. And unfortunately, it's not as easy as raise money and things work. If so, any company that gets into YC would work. Money does not equal product market fit. Money gives you, here's my best analogy for this. You don't congratulate a chef for buying ingredients. The money lets you buy ingredients, but the chef has to go out there and cook. That's exactly how I view it for a company raising venture capital. You don't really congratulate someone for the money. You have to go and execute on it. So we have money, which allows you to now buy ingredients, but you have to go now prepare the dishes, set the restaurant, and plate the food, get reviews, etc. So that's my favorite analogy for venture capital there. Shiny object syndrome, there are so many distractions, but remember, the key is picking the things you think you can do well. And I think the podcasting analogy is great here, where if you can be consistent in a specific area, you'll just outlast people. So for shiny object syndrome, you can go explore other things, but I think dealing with it's hard for sure. But what I just remind myself is that I now have enough examples of, hey, I stuck with this thing and saw results. That to me is the best way to avoid it, is just looking back in the past. Just think to yourself, what are things that I stuck with for an extended period of time? and I saw results. I think that's actually the easiest way to do it because it won't go away. There's always cool technology and cool things out there. And then lastly, what people think of you. I'm going to finish off with this. This is actually my banner on social media, and I put this here as a nice daily reminder to climb cringe mountain. So in anything in life, there's going to be naysayers. You are climbing the mountain, and on the other side, it's the land of cool. This is how I deal with what people think of me. I just remember they're naysayers. They're not climbing the mountain. It's much easier to critique than someone taking action. Typically, when someone critiques, it's because they're insecure about themselves not taking action. And I know if I just keep climbing, I'm going to get results. So that's my actual answer. Anytime I get a little self conscious or think, oh, what's someone going to think of me? I just think of cringe mountain, and I'm climbing cringe mountain. That person isn't most of the time. And last thing I'll say here before we go is oftentimes most people who are making digs or comments, it always comes from below you, not above you. Someone with a bigger business never makes fun of someone with a smaller business. Someone who's in good shape doesn't make fun of someone who's out of shape. It's usually coming from below. And I think, again, the reason why is it comes from people's insecurities when they see someone else taking action, and then they question, why didn't I take action? So Peak of Internet, I hope that was helpful. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, we'll cover any questions that come in. Please submit them, and we will see everyone next